So welcome everyone to today's session, Crafting Effective Research Incentives with Tremendous. We're really happy that you're able to join us today. My name is Diane and I head up content here at Lyssna. And if you haven't heard of us before, we're a user research platform that you can use to conduct user interviews and unmoderated usability tests. And you can also recruit from your own panel or from our integrated panel. And joining me today is Brenna from Tremendous. Brenna is a senior product marketing manager, and she will talk to you about what Tremendous does in just a moment. So today's session, we're aiming for around 45 minutes. Will largely be a presentation from Brenna, who'll be sharing insights from research that Tremendous and the Decision Lab conducted about research incentives. Thanks so much for joining us today, Brenna. And we'll wrap up at the end with any audience questions as well. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. So we do have the chat feature, so you're welcome to pop a question in the chat at any time, and we'll be collecting those questions and answering those at the end. There'll also be a couple of quizzes during the presentation, so the first correct comment in the chat wins, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. Today's session is being recorded and you'll receive a follow-up email afterwards with a link to the recording. So if you do need to drop off for any reason, you'll still be able to watch back later on. We also have Megan from the Lyssna team moderating in the chat and collecting your questions. So like I mentioned, we'll get to those at the end. And finally, we would love to gather your feedback on today's session and what kinds of content you'd like to see from us in the future. So we'll be sharing a link to a feedback survey in the chat and via email afterwards. So that's all from me for now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and leave the stage. 1 second. And I'll hand it over to Brenna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane, for the intro. Let me share my screen. Okay, awesome. So yeah, hi, I'm Brenna, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Tremendous. Thanks, Diane, for the intro. Super excited to talk to you all about some research incentive stuff today. Wanted to start with a quick overview on Tremendous, just so you guys know where I'm coming from and who's giving you the presentation. So Tremendous is a global rewards and incentives platform that offers nearly 2,000 redemption options, which cover over 200 countries. And our platform allows you to send thousands of incentives within minutes. We have bulk upload features, integrations, and we also have dedicated customer and recipient support, along with full tracking and reporting within our dashboards. So yeah, just a quick overview on who we are. Let's jump into our topic for today. Cool. So we are going to talk about the incentives that participants actually want. So as Diane said, we worked with the Decision Lab on a series of experiments around this topic, and we're excited to go through the results with you guys today. So everything you see today should be super practical and actionable advice on how to pick an incentive tailored to your study and participant population. So good research is almost always incentivized. Research orgs often offer a variety of incentives, from swag, being entered into a lottery, Amazon gift cards, but unsurprisingly, at the end of the day, people usually want money. So after talking with a ton of researchers, we realized that there isn't good data on how to set or adjust an incentive after you toggle a certain variable. So we designed an experiment to answer the following questions. The first being, how much should you pay for a survey versus an interview? The second being, how much should you increase the incentive if it's a $5 commitment, 5-minute commitment, a 15-minute one, or something much longer? Next, does it matter if the research is about a sensitive topic or something seemingly innocuous? Next, to what degree does the preference of your target population matter? And lastly, how do participants value or devalue different incentive types like cash, Amazon gift cards, Visa prepaid cards, and checks? So our approach. Again, we partnered with the Decision Lab to do a conjoint analysis to measure what participants actually want. And with this methodology, we had 300 participants who were shown 2 hypothetical research programs, such as the 2 that you see on the screen here. And they were asked to pick which one they perceived to be better. In total, we had data from about 3,000 simulated decisions that we analyzed, which we learned how much participants value their time, how that valuation changes depending on the design of a study, and how various types of incentives differentially affect participant motivation. So with this presentation and our research incentive calculator, which I'll walk through at the end, will help you get the most bang for your buck while still doing right by the participants at the heart of your study. So let's hop right into our 6 steps to building a research incentives program. So we found that as a baseline, you should pay participants $1.76 per minute. This is in USD. And as duration increases, that amount gets cheaper. So research participants, as I said at the beginning, they primarily want to be paid with money. And people who earn more than $50,000 a year also welcome gift cards, but only under specific conditions. And unemployed people, we found, really dislike gift cards. So, time is the most important variable. Pretty unsurprising, but figuring out how long your study takes is the first step in putting together your research incentives program. Our first quiz. So this one's multiple choice. The first correct answer will get a $10 tremendous reward. So put your answers in the chat. Megan will be monitoring and reading out the winner. Our question is, how much should you pay someone for a 1-hour long study? A, $50, B, $70, C, $100, or D, $110? I'll give you guys a little bit of time. I'm not sure if I'll be able to hear anyone, and I can't see the chat. So maybe I'll just give it a second and then assume after a little bit that people have populated the chat. Okay, gonna assume people have guessed by now. So the correct answer is B, $70. Megan, please note who the winner is. And if you are the winner, please send an email to my email, which is brenna@tremendous.com, with the subject line research incentive research. And I'll get you paid with your $10 tremendous reward by tomorrow. Jumping back into the research. So for the sake of simplicity, we'll share some standard rates on some standard times that are taken for a task typically. So for a 15-minute task, people typically want $26.40 on average. And that number jumps to about $48 for a 30-minute task and to a little more than $69 for a 60-minute task. Keep in mind, though, that these numbers are viewed in isolation. So once you start adding in the study type, participant demographics, and other variables, these amounts do change. But time, of course, is the most prevalent variable to this. And as you can see from the chart, the incentive amount per minute is not linear. So again, going back to the idea that it's not linear, one thing to keep in mind is that the longer your experiment runs, the cheaper each additional minute becomes. So this essentially accounts for there being a cost to get someone in the door. So for example, minutes 1 to 15 cost you on average $1.76 per minute. Now say you're increasing the length of your study to 30 minutes. The price of each additional minute is now $1.44. Finally, boost your interview time past 30 minutes, then each additional minute will cost only 71 cents. These findings have important implications for how researchers should approach their experimental design. While some researchers may worry about how increasing study length will impact participant motivation, it may, in fact, be relatively inexpensive to include additional questions while still adequately compensating your respondents. So step two is determining which type of research you're running. So by using the discrete choice methodology, we presented participants with two options and asked them to choose which is better. This allowed us to analyze their preference or different variables and assign a dollar value to each of those preferences. So with that, we can measure exactly how much people prefer participating in an interview versus a survey. And unsurprisingly, people want to be paid more for studies that require talking to an actual person. On average, people expect to be paid $8.66 more for an interview than a survey. Breaking this down by employment status, we see that unemployed people find interviews particularly unattractive. This group wants to be compensated $20.57 more on average to do an interview. And for employed people, the difference is only $7.62. So another factor to consider is researchers also need to think about the sensitivity of the subject matter at hand. So that's step 3. Does your study get personal? In our study, we probed how different question types and topics affect participant motivation levels. And we found that on average, participants would need to be compensated $3.40 more if the experiment dealt in sensitive or personal matters. An example here that we used was household debt, as opposed to surface level content. Here we used cereal preferences. However, there are some crucial caveats to this finding. There is an interaction between study length and subject matter. For 5 to 30-minute studies, the effective subject matter was negligible. By contrast, asking someone to talk about household debt for an hour will require about $9 extra in compensation compared to asking someone about a more casual subject for an hour. This effect seems to be primarily driven by longer studies included in the experiment, which means that you should pay an additional $9 if your study touches a sensitive subject and takes 60 minutes or longer. So income matters. Middle income earners, people who are earning between $50K and $100K per year, showed the strongest sensitivity to research topic. They would need to be compensated $8.37 more than someone with an income of below $50,000 a year to take a survey about a sensitive subject. The causality of this finding is honestly unclear to us. Whether it be, is debt a particularly touchy subject for middle income earners? Is cereal a particularly interesting one? We're not quite sure. So jumping into step 4, who you target for your research matters, but some characteristics matter more than others. So jumping into our next quiz, how much more should you pay an unemployed person than someone earning $50,000 a year? A, 5%, B, 10%, C, 15%, or D, you pay them the same. assuming you guys have all had time to read this while my dog was barking. So I think we can move along to the next question rather quickly, or sorry, the answer rather quickly. The answer is D. We'll get into the details in a second, but you pay them the same. Again, whoever won, email my email and we will get you paid by tomorrow. Let's jump back to the research. So income mostly doesn't matter. Intuitively, we might expect participants' income to affect their perception of research incentives. And you might think that high earners would assign a greater value to their own time. And for the super high income earners, you would be right. So in our sample, respondents at the highest end of the wealth spectrum did have noticeably higher expectations for research compensation. So specifically, those earning $200,000 or more per year needed to be paid 46% more than low income earners, those earning under $50,000 a year, for these incentives to have the same appeal. But for the most part, all the people we surveyed valued their time equally outside of this group, regardless of whether they were working or how much they were earning. The exception here is students. So students are an interesting subset. A lot of university research relies on students for their studies. And indeed, they are the most cost-effective group. And this is compared against people who are employed, unemployed, and those not in the labor force. And we found that students can be compensated 80% as much as others while still achieving the same utility. We often get asked the question of how B2B versus B2C populations affect research incentive amounts. But whether someone is a consumer or a business person is very contextual. The same person could be one or both, depending on the setting or the content of the study. And with our methodology that we used for this study, we weren't able to properly test that. And we understand that this isn't the most satisfying answer, and it is on our list of details to dig into further when we continue our research. And we're definitely open to feedback on what would be useful for our next stages of research. So jumping into step 5. Step 5 is all about the incentive type, which is what we know best at Tremendous. So we tested a variety of incentive types within this research to see which are the most appealing to research participants. And we discovered that the incentive you select can impact motivation levels. So yeah, as I said at the beginning, people want money. This graphic shows the relative perception of payout options. So the numbers didn't change notably when we changed the amount, so it's not a linear comparison. And you can see the exact change on average in offered options through our incentives calculator, which again, I will do a quick demo of at the end of this presentation. Specifically, cash offers at least $9.50 of additional value over any other incentive type that we studied. And this holds true for all study lengths. Again, wasn't linear. On the flip side, mailed checks need to be $13.37 larger to be perceived as equal in value as a cash transfer. And after cash, Visa prepaid cards are the next best option, presumably due to their flexibility of use. And gift cards of the participant's choice were valued as slightly more than gift cards specifically for Amazon. So we also found some interactions between participant characteristics and the incentives that they preferred. And namely, this would be if your target audience earns a higher income. So we're classifying that as anything above $50,000 per year. Flexible gift cards are actually an equally attractive option to cash or Visa prepaid cards. And if you're hoping to speak to low income or unemployed people, try to avoid digital gift cards, and even to large retailers like Amazon. An Amazon gift card would need to be loaded with around $14 more to be valued equally to money for this demographic group. So if Venmo, PayPal, bank transfers, Zelle are considered the most valuable, then why, you may be asking, why not just offer those and call it a day? So cash transfers are typically the best option for recipients. It's not always the best option for researchers. This is usually because it can be a pain to administer. Sending a bank transfer requires the customer's account info, which many participants hesitate to share or struggle to locate. The funds also take a few days to show up in their account. Not every consumer has PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. And those that do sometimes share the wrong email addresses or phone number. And also, it's a real pain to send these in bulk directly on the platform if you're running a larger study. So yeah, it's just as valuable to know what you don't need to care about when you're thinking about your research incentives program and what variables actually don't matter. So let's jump into which variables didn't yield significant findings in our analyses. So payment timing doesn't matter. It matters how much you pay your participants and how you pay them. But when you pay them doesn't seem to make a difference for incentivization. So we tested a number of different payment schemes. First, upfront payment. Second, payment after the study was completed. And third, a blend with partial payment before and the remainder after. And we found that no significant differences emerged between these three options. And I do want to give a quick caveat on this one. We drew our sample from an online research pool where after the fact payment is standard. So it's possible that research participants who are not accustomed to this payment scheme could potentially show different preferences. So we've run through all the variables and how they interact or don't. So let's go over a quick overview of what we talked about so you can keep them in mind when you're going to build an incentive strategy for your research program. But before we get into it, our third and final quiz, type your answer into the chat. We'll give a little bit more time for this one as it's free form. Again, first winner gets $10. The question is, what's the most important variable in determining how to incentivize participants? I will give 20 seconds. Okay, I imagine some people have answered. Oh, I can see the number in the chat. I'll give it a little bit more time. Okay, I see there's been at least about 4 answers. So let's reveal. Duration. If you said time, also right, but the correct answer is duration. So whoever got that right, again, same process, shoot me an email and we'll get you paid by tomorrow. So jumping through the quick highlights. So study length has the greatest influence on how participants perceive the research incentives. The relationship between study length and incentive expectations is not linear. So the longer your experiment runs, the cheaper each additional minute becomes, with the first 15 minutes costing $1.76 per minute, greater than 30 minutes only costing 71 cents per minute. Some variables matter more than others. So participants require more compensation for research that involves human interaction. Studies revolving around sensitive subject matter are also more expensive. And lastly, participant employment status and income level did not show any significant effects in our analysis, with 2 exceptions. The first being very high earners of over 200K per year expected larger monetary incentives, and students were the least expensive group, requiring only about 80% as much as the other groups to achieve the same utility. So people primarily want money. Cash transfers are always preferred, offering at least $9.50 of additional value over any other incentive type that we studied, with mail checks being the least preferred from all groups, needing to be about $13.37 greater in order to be perceived as equal in value to a cash transfer. But cash transfers have downsides, from sending a bank transfer requiring customers' account info, the funds taking a few days to show up, not every customer having PayPal or Venmo or Zelle, those that do sometimes sharing the wrong information. It's a real pain to send in bulk. And actually, in many cases, people actually can't accept money. So we've put all of these findings into a research incentives calculator so you can input your variables to figure out the best amount without having to manually take into account all of these variables we just talked about today. I will give a caveat. I know we have a very international audience here today. Right now, this is in USD only. You can obviously extrapolate the learnings from the different variables that you input for your own currency, but the international one we will hopefully have coming soon. So all you have to do is tell us a little bit about your study, and the algorithm that is backed by this research that we did with the Decision Lab will spit out the amount, the recommended research amount per participant that will satisfy them based on our research. And then we'll also tell you the total amount if you implement or if you input the sample size of your study. So I can jump to the research calculator to show you guys how it works. So here is the Tremendous website. And you input, I had previously inputted some variables. So online survey for 30 minutes, incentive type being a Visa prepaid card. I chose non-sensitive subject matter. Professional, you can choose any type of target population, and then participant income, and then a sample size of 101. Input your personal information, and then it will spit out your recommended incentive amount. And then you can always go back and play around with some variables and say, oh, I want to see how a professional who's making $200,000 per year, how that affects the incentive amount. And you can play around with different variables to see what will affect your incentive at the end of the day. Awesome. Any questions for the group? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat.
Awesome, Brett. Thank you. It was really cool to see the calculator and exciting to hear that you'll be looking to use different currencies, because I think that's going to be super helpful for a lot of people around the world. We've had one, if you have any questions for Brenna, please do pop them in the chat and we'll get to those. We did have one question around the checks. Did you find that the reason that was like the lowest on the list was because it just requires more effort on the participants' part?
So we didn't have a reason in the study that they had to answer, but anecdotally, our company works with a lot of people who are switching to us from physical checks. And usually what we hear a lot of the time is actually the time that it takes for the participant to get the check, cash the check, and have the money accessible to them is actually one of the biggest pain points, is just the time from completing the study to having the reward accessible to them is huge. Definitely more effort goes into it on everyone's end. I mean, researchers don't like issuing manual checks, and people don't like waiting to receive them and having to manually cash them. So I think just all in all, there's a lot of hurdles with checks that people would prefer to avoid if possible.
That makes a lot of sense. I know here in Australia, checks are basically obsolete. Like we don't really use them very often. So I can see why a bank transfer or a digital gift card, like a digital card, would be a lot more useful for participants and a lot quicker as well.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Any other questions?
We don't have any questions coming through at the moment. I wanted to find out, and maybe the research didn't address this, but were there any kind of cultural considerations as well? Like if you're incentivizing, a lot of people will interview, say, participants from different countries, if they've got a global audience. Was that sort of taken into consideration in this study, or something that you'll look to in future?
Yeah, so it's actually on our plans for the next iteration of the calculator, which we don't have a timeline for right now, but that is our first kind of next step for it. To be honest, the initial research was going to be too complicated if we were adding in a global audience, because it's super hard to control how much of the audience is coming from different countries. Everyone has different expectations. So our first iteration was focused on people in the US with USD rewards.
That makes sense. Yep. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and if, like Brenna said as well, if anyone has feedback on what to find out about B2B versus B2C participants, just reach out and let us know, because I think that would be that's a question that does come up quite a lot. So yeah, let us know if you've got any feedback that they should take into consideration. It doesn't look like we've got any more questions through, so we might wrap up a little early. But just before we do, I just want to let everyone know, I'm just going to share my screen for the little finale here. I just want to say thank you so much, Brenna, for the presentation today. That was super interesting. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I'm sure the calculator will come in really handy for anyone who conducts research in their roles. Brenna, if people want to find out more about Tremendous or get in touch, please, where should they go?
Yeah, so if you guys have any more questions, feedback, anything like that, please send it to my email, which is Brenna@Tremendous. Megan just popped the calculator into the chat if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, LinkedIn message, anything like that if you have any questions about the research, Tremendous in general, or anything like that.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. If you have any feedback about our session, or if there's something that you'd like to see us cover in the future, please just fill in the feedback survey that will be coming out via the post-event email. And just also to let you know, if you haven't used Lyssna before, we do have a free plan that you can, if you want to try it out, you can just head to lyssna.com. Or give us a follow on socials as well at We Are Lyssna. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Brenna, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.